Part 1: The sign in the ice in Yakutia. The cold isn't just a season, it's a living thing. It creeps into your bones, freezes your breath in midair, and turns even the strongest men brittle. At -71°C, nothing moved without a reason. And that morning, we had a reason big enough to risk everything. It started with a sound, a deep, resonant groan rolling under the ice. At first, we thought it was the ice shifting, the kind of warning that keeps you off certain patches. But the elders, they knew better. "It's not the ice," old Stepan said, his breath curling in silver clouds. "It's a whale, a big, 1 to 10,000 kilogram bowhead, trapped under shifting sea ice. Had wandered too far into our hunting waters. In this cold, such a chance came once in a lifetime. The meat, the blubber, the oil, it could feed the village for months, maybe. See us through the winter, but getting it, that was another story. The sea was a 2-day sled journey away, over terrain that could kill a careless traveler in an hour. We loaded the sledges before sunrise, harpoons sharpened from tempered steel, ropes thicker than a man's wrist, bone-handled, knives wrapped in reindeer hide. The dogs paced in the snow, sensing the danger ahead. By the time we reached the first frozen inlet, the wind was already cutting sideways, stabbing through every seam in our furs. The ice groaned beneath us, a reminder that beneath our feet was black water colder than death itself. Somewhere under that shifting lid, the whale moved, slow, massive, breathing through narrow cracks in the ice. We found the first sign near dusk, a wide circle of open water, steam curling from its edges, the air heavy with the smell of salt and life. The whale had surfaced here recently, pushing ice aside with its back, but it was moving, always moving, and we'd have to track it under the ice to its next breathing hole. That night, we made camp in the lee of a pressure ridge, where the ice had buckled into jagged towers. The fire sputtered and hissed, throwing sparks into the dark. No one slept well. Every gust of wind rattled the ice, and far away, something huge exhaled through a blowhole, the sound muffled but impossibly close. By dawn, the ice was shifting again. We followed the sound of its breath, moving slow, testing each step. The whale was close enough now that the ice itself trembled when it swam beneath us. But this wasn't open water. This was a battlefield made of freezing salt, cracking ice, and the patience of predators. We waited at the edge of a narrow lead, harpoons ready, breath steaming in the -71°C air. Somewhere in the darkness, below, a living mountain of muscle and fat turned in slow circles, searching for the hole we guarded. And when it came, we'd have one chance. Part to the breath of the Leviathan. Cold was so sharp, it felt like glass inside our lungs. Every breath stole more heat from our bodies. Our eyelashes froze together if we blinked too slowly. But no one moved away. From the lead, the whale was near. You could feel it in your boots. A vibration in the ice like the distant roll of thunder. Old Stepan crouched low, his mittened hands gripping the shaft of his harpoon. "When it rises, don't throw too soon," he murmured. "You throw early, you lose the head. You lose the head, you lose the whale." His eyes, pale as drift ice, never left the water. Minutes passed. Then, a sound like the earth sighing. A sudden bloom of mist exploded into the air, shimmering in the pale sun. The whale had surfaced. It was enormous, even through the cloud of its breath. We could see the slick black dome of its back breaking the surface, glistening with a layer of frost that formed the instant it met the air. Its size made the ice around it shift and crack. One wrong move and it could slam its tail down, shattering the fragile platform we stood on. Stepan moved first. The harpoon flashed in the sun. The rope coiled at his feet, leaping after it. The steel head struck deep into the blubber with a sound like splitting timber. The whale bellowed, a low, resonant sound that vibrated in our chests and dove hard, dragging the rope toward the hole. The dogs barked wildly, their paws dancing in the snow as the rope screamed over the ice. 2 men leapt on it, bracing, with their boots, gloves burning from the friction. Despite the cold, more harpoons followed, each line biting into the whale's massive frame. It was a fight now, not just against the animal, but against the ice itself. The whale surged under us, the water's black surface rolling in the narrow lead, sending waves that splashed over the ice and froze instantly. turning our footing treacherous. The ropes hissed and snapped taut, each one our lifeline to the prize. Hours passed in a blur of freezing spray, shouted orders, and the brutal pull and give of the hunt. We couldn't let the whale break free, but we couldn't haul it up here either, not whole. The plan was to exhaust it, force it to surface again and again until its strength ebbed. In 7-1C, exhaustion came faster for all of us. By the time the sun began to sink, painting the ice in gold and blood orange, the whale's movements had slowed. It rose less often, lingered longer at the surface, its breath weaker. The ice was littered with frost-crusted ropes and steaming patches where the sea had burst through. That night, we didn't rest. We kept the lines taut, the dogs tethered, the fires small. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the tents. Somewhere in the black water, the whale turned. Slowly, still alive, still ours. If we could finish what we started. In Yakutia, there's a saying, the ice keeps no debts. If we failed, the sea would take back its giant without a second thought. And in the morning, the coldest place on earth would test whether we had the will and the strength to claim it. Part 3. The last breath of the whale morning came without warmth. The sun rose pale and weak, a coin of frozen light over a plain of white and blue. The whale was still there, tethered to us by 6 harpoon lines that groaned in the ice like straining timbers in a storm. Overnight, the water around the leads had glazed over with thin sheets of ice, which we had to break constantly to keep the ropes from sealing under it. Steppen was the first to speak. Today it ends, one way or another. We gathered around the largest lead. The air above it shimmered faintly with the ghost of the whale's breath. It was surfacing more often now, its great bulk rising with a sluggishness that told us the cold and the ropes had done their work. The dogs sat silent for once, watching with tense, yellow-eyed focus. They knew the plan was simple but merciless. As soon as the whale broke the surface, 3 more harpoons would be driven deep into the neck, just behind the blowhole, while others hauled on the ropes to keep it close. Then came the final thrust. The water boiled. A mountain of black, ridged flesh erupted upward, scattering chunks of ice like toys. The whale's eye, dark, wide, shining with a strange, knowing light, rolled toward us. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Steppen roared, and the harpoons flew. One struck home with a wet, ripping sound. Another glanced off, sliding uselessly down the slick hide. The third buried itself deep, and the whale let out a shuddering exhale that hung in the air like a frozen cloud. The ropes surged, pulling us forward, boots skidding on ice. We dug in, leaning back with every ounce of strength. Then came the last act. The killing lance, a steel-tipped shaft, built for one purpose, was handed to Mikhail, the youngest, but strongest among us. He stepped to the edge, braced his feet, and as the whale rolled, he drove it down with both hands. The sound was nothing like in stories, not a clean strike, but a muffled crunch, the deep tearing of meat and sinew. The whale spasmed, the sea exploded in spray, and then stillness, silence fell, broken only by the soft hiss of water settling. Steam rose from the lead. The ropes lay slack. We stood there, staring, each man knowing we'd just secured enough food, oil, and bone to see the village through the worst of the winter. But we also knew the hardest part had just begun, hauling and butchering a beast that weighed more than 10,000 kilograms before the ice or scavengers took their share. Axes and long knives appeared. We worked in teams, cutting long strips of blubber, rolling them onto sleds pulled by panting dogs. The meat steamed in the air, instantly crusting over with frost. The smell, rich, oily, primal, clung to our gloves, our beards, our very skin. As we worked, the cold became an enemy in its own right. The blood from the whale froze into red crystal on the ice, turning every surface slick. Fingers went numb within minutes if mittens came off. Even breathing felt heavy, as if the air itself was weighing down our chests. But we could not stop. Every hour lost meant losing more to the cold, or to wolves that had already begun to appear on the horizon, gray shapes moving low and silent. By the time the sun dipped again, half the whale was gone, loaded onto sleds, bound for the village. The rest would be finished tomorrow. As we left the carcass behind under a guard of 2 men and a fire, I looked back. The great shape lay half submerged in its own steam, a black monument against the white. In Yakutia, they say that taking a whale is like taking the breath from the sea. You owe it a piece of your own. That night, as we huddled in our tents with the smell of boiling blubber filling the air, I wondered which piece of us the sea would claim in return. Part 4. The feast in the frozen night. The second morning, the whale's body was no longer a thing of awe. It was work. Endless, freezing work. The wind had picked up overnight, sweeping fine snow into the cuts we'd made, sealing them in white crust. The guards reported wolves had circled in the dark, their eyes like dim lanterns in the distance, but none had dared come close. Not yet. We took our sleds back to the carcass. The ice underfoot had turned pink from frozen blood, and each step gave off a dry crunch, like walking on shards of glass. Steam still rose from the torn blubber where yesterday's cuts ended, but the rest of the whale had stiffened, locked in place by the -71 sea air. Axes rang against it like against oak. Every blow sent shocks up the arms, hands numbed even inside thick fur mitts. Still, we worked in silence. Men speak less when breath comes in clouds that freeze on their beards in seconds. Strips of blubber were rolled like thick carpets, heavy enough for 2 men to wrestle onto a sled. Meat came next, long, deep cuts, the red so vivid it seemed alive against the dead white all around. The dogs stood restless, tails low, their noses twitching as the smell grew stronger. They knew this was a prize few villages would ever see. By midday, the wind cut sharper. The air felt alive with ice, small grains stinging any exposed skin. One sled overturned, spilling half a load into the snow, and we had to scramble to recover it before the wind buried it. More wolves appeared on the horizon, a dozen, maybe more, pacing us at a distance, waiting for the moment when human strength faltered. We finished the butchering by dusk. The skeleton loomed like a shipwreck frozen in the ice, ribs arching. Toward the dim sky, we left it there, for the foxes and the crows. Some said the spirits would take offense, that nothing from such a catch should be wasted. But no one had the strength to argue. The cold was in our bones now, moving slow through our veins. The trip back to the village was long. The sleds groaning under their loads, the dogs strained, paws slipping, tongues hanging. The smell of fresh whale rode with us, a heavy, oily perfume that drew the wolves closer. Once, they darted near enough that Stepan fired his rifle into the air. The sound cracking like ice underfoot. They scattered, but only for a while. When the first huts came into view through the white haze, a cheer went up from those ahead. Women and children ran to meet us, their faces half hidden in fur hoods, eyes wide at the sight of so much food. The village had been waiting in hunger, dried fish and scraps for weeks, and now here was life in its rawest form. The whale was portioned out that night by the elders. Fat was rendered into oil, steaming pots bubbling over open fires, the smell curling into the dark sky. Meat was cut, salted, and packed into ice pits. Dogs were fed until their ribs vanished under fur. Even the smallest child carried strips of blubber in both hands, grinning through chattering teeth. The feast began under the stars. Thick pieces of meat were boiled until tender, then eaten with bare hands, oil dripped down chins, freezing almost as fast as it fell. Old songs were sung, the kind that speak of hunts and storms, and the debt every man owes the sea. Some said the whale had chosen us, that it had come into our waters knowing it would give itself to the village. Others said nonsense. We'd taken it because we could. I didn't speak. My hands ached from the cold, my back was a knot of pain. But I knew one thing. This whale had changed us. In a land where winter is a predator, survival isn't just luck. It's teeth in the dark, steel in the hands, and the will to stand against both ice and sea. By the firelight, Stepan sat apart, sharpening his harpoon in slow, measured strokes. I asked him why. He looked at the blade, then at the black sky, and said only, "The sea remembers. We'd better be ready when it comes calling again." That night, as I lay in the warmth of a fur-lined bed, belly full for the first time in months, I could still see the whale's eye in my mind, dark, deep, and unblinking. The hunt was over, but the memory would never thaw.